Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to the Expedition Guide. This should be part 4 and I'm hoping what will be the final part of this guide. So yes, we'll be looking at the Kharak data presentation, the history of Kharak, which is basically a timeline, and part 10 of Rachel, which is Rachel's journal. Alright, so this will hopefully be fairly short. I only have a couple of things to talk about. So let's start off with Kharak data presentation, the latest satellite telemetry report. First it needs to load in, of course. Alright, so this is really all it is. It's just a globe, right? A digital globe of Kharak here. So we can see certain things like there's Epsilon base, right? We have the coalition territories and the northern frontier up here. We have the boneyard there. And the Great Banded Desert. Okay. So this is, right, we mentioned that the polar regions of the planet are probably the most habitable, right? As well as down south, right? Not many people live in the desert because it gets so hot, especially around the equatorial regions. So somewhere up here is Tyr, the capital, and which the Nabal established to end the heresy wars. And the Paktu at some point crossed the Great Banded Desert to escape the Sidim pogroms. And what's interesting here is that it lets you rotate it all the way up to the north. Right, and you can see the salt seas. Presumably these are like maybe some bodies of water, like large lakes or something. And but it doesn't let you rotate it all the way down here, right? We have the new dancing grounds, the new Fair and Shah, which were established after the massacre of the originals. And if we recall our history, right, the Manani at the Fair and Shah, the original Fair and Shah, were slaughtered by the Sidim in 513. Right, the Paktu crossed the Great Banded Desert in 490, and you can't really see it, but way down there, right, I think that's the Hunan Mountains. It's really hard to make out, but presumably somewhere around there is the Magirian Sea. So we have other places like the Wanderers Pass, the Sarathi Basin, Belladin Dune Sea, Syrian Flats, Cape Wrath, Desert Proving Grounds, Iraqi Highlands, Glass Basin, the Anomaly, right? In fact, we can zoom on it. There's some satellite imagery of it there, the Iraqi Anomaly. And if we click Artifacts, you can see that satellite scans have picked up all these little yellow spots. Those are presumably pieces of destroyed wreckage that they've found. Various smaller artifacts among the desert. Amazingly, there's literally nothing of note on the other side of the planet. Apart from the new dancing grounds, we have the wastes, the rending peaks. And here is the general course that the expedition will take. We'll set off from around roughly Epsilon base, right? Go down past Cape Wrath, head basically southeast, right? Through the Iraqi Highlands and down towards the Anomaly. So that's basically what that is. So yeah, that's just latest satellite imagery. And if we look at the history of Kharak, the timeline of notable dates, right? So we start here at 0 KDS, the establishment of official Kharakian dating system. Jumping up to 340 KDS, the first mention of Kith Manan, known as the Travelers. 416, Kith Soban, the Great Brotherhood, is formed. 462, the Sidim Council proclaims that only the Sidim are of divine origin. All other Kithid are native to Kharak and considered Gritidim, or Sand People. Indeed. So, yeah, the Sidim weren't making friends at that time. In 488, Kith Paktu are driven from their ancestral homes and lands by the Sidim. And that's when they started making their... Right here it is. The Great Migration begins. Nearly 50 Paktu families set sail from Albegido and crossed the Banded Desert on the winds of the Chakmat in hopes of reaching the southern pole. Only 17 survived the long journey. So eventually they reached it, and 3 years later, in 493, members of the Paktu, now settled in the south, crossed the Banded Desert north again in order to tell others what they've established. In 513, the Sidim slaughter the Manani at the Faran Shah, the dancing grounds. And in 520, the Heresy Wars begin, which last from about 520 to 820. The two largest kith in the north, the Sidim and the Galcian, go to war over what had caused the gods to place them on such an inhospitable world. So essentially it's a religious war, right? In 652, the Sidim launched the first of 3 assaults on the southern lands, seeking tribute from kithid they still consider vassal clans. It does not succeed. In 656, Jorah Manan declares an end to her kith's war against the Sidim. The Manan now focuses exclusively on trade, and a new dancing grounds is built in the Paktu-held south. In 698, Kim Paktu, the grandson of Majir Paktu and leader of the Paktu Kissa, defeats Liam Galcian and his men at the Battle of the Magirian Sea. It was the last crusade ever attempted against the Paktu. And finally, we've reached the 700s. In 717, the Galcian retreat into the desert wastelands, banned in the north, claim its decadence would eventually bring down the wrath of Seljuk. Also in that year, Mirpat Galcian Sa orders his people to blow up the series of wind baffles, dikes, and paths that protect the city of Seljuk Ka. It is considered the artistic gem of Kharak at the time, and it is completely buried under the sand, killing thousands. Not only did they basically destroy the gem of Kharak, the city of Seljuk Ka, but also they retreat into the desert. In 718, Galcian is convicted in absentia and deemed an outlaw kith. And let's go back here, right? Oh, we still got about 100 years of war. In 810, Kith Nabal emerges from their valley enclave at Tyr, exposing Kharak to new advanced science and technology, therefore unknown, including explosive steam power refining techniques, and which they kept a secret for more than 100 years. Their presence brought an end to the Heresy Wars that raged for almost 300 years. So yeah, the Heresy Wars begin in 520, and it ends with the Nabal emerging at Tyr. They unify, or at least somewhat unify, many of the clans. In 830, the Age of Reason begins, and the capital is moved to Tyr. Finally, in 1024, the Kharak's first orbital flight was launched. It was met with strong protest among many members of society that led to the Suleiman riots. And if you remember from the first Homeworld 1 historical and technical briefing, right, there are some riots and some people basically sacrificed themselves, became martyrs for the cause, right, underneath the launch vehicle of that. And again, a lot of this is, the idea that if the Kharakians begin a space program and launch themselves up into space, right, it will bring down the wrath of Seljuk. So that's basically their overarching prophecy. 1057, Project Stormbreaker, a giant ridge of sand baffle walls a full kilometer wide and thousands of kilometers long, girdling the entire lower face of the barrier mountains is begun. It is hoped that it will hold back the advancing desert sand. In 1061, during a manned spaceflight, crew members discover floating debris in high orbit. It is determined that the debris is metallic, but its atomic composition bears no similarities to anything known to exist on Kharak. From 1061 to 1110 KDS, the discovery and study of Kharakian space debris leads to great scientific progress in metallurgy and manufacturing, along with the development of fission and fusion power plants. Alright, so they have nuclear power now. So basically, in a very short span from 1024 to 1061, right, the Kharakians have a fledgling space program and nuclear power. Very good. In 1074, the Night of Fiery Daggers, or the Sifar Korshesh. On the first night of 1074, 10,000 Galcian soldiers attacked the twin forts along the Stormbreaker Wall. In 1100, Kissajet instituted a new orbital sensor system, a series of potent deep scan radar satellites capable of sweeping the space around Kharak for hundreds of millions of kilometers, called Project VIII. In 1106, Operation Skullbria is launched. The deep desert expedition is meant to find and claim the Draki object for the Northern Coalition. Less than a month after leaving port, all contact with Tyr is lost. The same year, Lekab Draki, working on a malfunctioning Vincal satellite, accidentally detects hundreds of anomalies scattered across the Great Banded Desert. One of the signals he detects rivals that of Kharak's sun. Initially referred to as the Draki object, it soon becomes officially known as the primary anomaly. Okay, so the next year, planning and design for the second expedition to find and retrieve the Draki object is approved by the Diomid. The construction of the new Sakala-class carriers is accelerated. Also, the search for survivors of the Skullbria expedition is called off. The flagship carrier, Ifrit Nabal, and her crew are officially declared lost. In 1108, the search for survivors of the Skullbria expedition is called off. The flagship... Wait, what? So when did they declare this lost? It says in 1107 the exact same thing happened. Maybe it just took them a long time to make that decision. In 1109, the first Sakala-class deep desert carrier rolls off the line. Addressing all the shortcomings of the predecessor, the newly commissioned carriers can move faster, last longer, and hit harder than the Ifrit class. Also that year, the Sajet carrier Kapisi, one of the new Sakala-class deep desert carriers, is put into service. And which brings us to the present day, at least present as of this game. In 1110, Operation Gidim, the second Draki expedition, is cleared for launch. So this was essentially obviously a timeline, and I'm going to come back to this in just a minute after we go to Rachel's journal, personal journal, transcription of archived journal entries, First Science Officer Rachel Sajet. So, excerpt from the Sajet archives. It seems strange to be writing this with an inscriber on parchment instead of just typing it into my regular journal, but today is not a day for words and feelings that can be erased or altered with a keystroke. I don't want to forget this day. I don't want to forget this feeling. I don't want to change it later because it seems juvenile or too emotional. I want it to endure for as long as the parchment lasts. As much as it seems wrong to keep something from returning to the wheel, this day will not be recycled, because this is the day they declared Jacob dead. They were decent about it. A friend from Intel and her superior came to my office at the lab and told me the news that we had all seen coming. There was clasping and thanking for the sacrifice of my family, and a copy of the announcement that would be released to the world later in the day. 3 paragraphs, that was all. That was all his dreams, my dreams accounted for. 3 official formal paragraphs. The first, a reminder to everyone that Ifrit Nabal ceased communications 2 years ago during a storm that covered almost the entire southern hemisphere of our world. It included a list of the people and the resources they had committed in the interim, trying to find any trace of that magnificent carrier. Then the death sentence. As final as the last night, the proclamation that after all this time and effort, there was no choice but to declare that Ifrit lost with all hands, the motions of mourning to begin officially in 3 turns' time. And finally, ever so politely, the council mentions the command crew by name and assures us that these brave leaders and all who followed them died heroes and will be recorded with full honors. Honors to the dead offered as a comfort to the shattered living. And that's where I see his name, where I will never be able to unsee it. First Officer Jacob Sajet, the honored dead, Jacob Sajet, my brother, among those who have gone into the sands and fallen into the heart of the world. Alright, so that was 2315. Going ahead to 0211. I'm trying to make out... Okay, yeah, so these are going from top to bottom, okay. So I'm trying to make out what these... Is this a timestamp or a date or what? Yeah, anyway. So, a new expedition. Arcing sheets of lightning crawl across the high desert tonight, etching fine lines of glass across the sand for miles, and driving the The SAT team's crazy with endless blinded sensors. Only a mad woman would be out beyond the walls tonight, but I couldn't stand it any longer. I have no one to turn to, no one to tell my news. If I dropped so much as a hint, I'd face 2 months of moral re-education classes, and my security clearance would fall so low that only the Somtag could find it. But none of this matters. For the first time in a year, I can breathe. I have purpose again. They are sending out another expedition. I had nearly forgotten the listener programs I spread throughout Kith Nabal's assets, and the Diamond's financial systems before Jacob set off on his mission. Not easy to hack their systems, but I have been making digital Kith agents since I was 8 years old. Everyone looks for deep taps, but no one thinks to look for the batch of memory that slips from system to system, just sniffing for the few words it has been told to find. When one of those loyal digital agents returned to my wrist today like a bedraggled little bird which finally wings back to its cages after being lost for years, it took all my will not to burst into tears of relief in the middle of the gymnasium. Operation Kadim confirmed, funding confirmed, design of Sakala-class carriers confirmed. I shuttered myself in my apartment and set out new tailor-made agents till I had enough of the story to know what I need to know, what I need to do. It's been kept from the public until the loss of Jacob's mission is completely swept under. But they are doing it. It's a bigger mission designed around cutting-edge adaptive tech. They are going to retrace the same route that the VIII mission took. Somewhere along that route, the secrets of my brother's death are buried. I need to be there. Outside my runner, the skies tear open, sheeting plasma races along just meters away, and in the explosive howl of the storm, I scream my relief and desire into the coruscating clouds. I have to get on this mission. I have less than 2 years to do it. Less than 2 years to transform myself from a Sajet data jockey to a military officer. No, not even just an officer, but a scout-qualified officer. I have to be out tasting the desert on the wind, feeling the dunes shift, seeing the signs I can trust no one else to see. I have to be where the answers are found. Alright, convictions. We all wonder about the limits of our convictions. What will our choices be when the storm comes to mountain and neither will give? Are we the kind of people that stand with our oaths, who do what is right no matter the cost? Or will we slide about in the wind, seeking opportunity above all else? We rehearse and tell ourselves who we will be when these moments come. But when the test begins, you see just how far you will go. You find out who you really are. I do not wonder anymore. I know. I'm Janira Kith, a hollow kinswoman, traitor to my oaths as a Sajet and a scientist. I was raised to seek and report the truth above all else, to go wherever the facts lead and present my findings without hesitation for review. If judged correct, my work would become another entry to the books of knowledge for my people. Today I turned my back on truth and science for the sake of my own personal agenda. Today I destroyed all records on my desertification analysis paper and erased the data. Tomorrow I will begin rewriting the paper and its conclusions, only using official satellite data cleared for use by the Diamond. And my conclusions will be that everything is fine, and will continue to be fine so long as current trends in conservation and recycling methods continue. Okay, so she's going to work as part of the government cover-up to the desertification that's going to destroy the planet. I do this because despite the numbers my hand-built slider drones have given me, I have seen the conflicting numbers from the Envirosats, which completely disagree with my data. I know that those numbers have a pattern, a sophisticated pattern that cleverly mimics the random nature of atmospheric phenomena, but a pattern nonetheless. The Diamond has been lying to us for decades. They have been denying environmental degradation and using false telemetry to back up their claims. After I got over my shock, my first thought was to publish immediately and open a real debate about our future. But then I dug a little deeper, with the ghost of Jacob's voice in my ear. Don't be the treel so clever it hunts down its own tail to death, Rachel. A careful search of deleted articles revealed a 12-year-old ghost paper from one Jral Haral, an environmental researcher in his Kith's science division. His data had come from monitoring modules carefully attached to his Kith's globe-spanning industrial transport vehicles. His study, like mine, did not use the Envirosat data. Jral presented his paper directly to the Diamond, a paper very similar to mine with the same implications. Kharak is dying. He was spreading the alarm. His reward was the destruction of his career nearly overnight. The Diamond science ministers rejected his paper. He lost his position. The Haral Saw disowned his research and declared him Genera Kith in front of all the recorders attending the council that year. Nabal Saw declared him a religious fanatic and supplied vague surveillance data showing Dural to have fundamentalist sympathies. He was accused of courting Gaussian representatives in the back streets of Tyr. Within a year, there was no further record of Dural at all. The last mention is a passing reference to he and his small immediate family going Kithless to a religious retreat in the low deserts beyond the Megarian Ocean. It could not be more clear. If I remain true to my convictions and publish, I will lose everything, including any chance of joining the next expedition to the primary anomaly. If I remain true to my brother, I make my career and my belief in science just so much shifting sand. Not really a choice at all, as I write by the light of foul-burning data flops and printout archives. I have just one more month before my cross-training to the Sujet Marshal Division is complete. There is no principal large enough to have myself blacklisted now, and lose any chance of being there when they find any trace of the Ifrit. Those who are covering up these changes to our world are clearly extremely powerful, and they clearly want to find out what is causing the primary anomaly just as much as I want to discover Jacob's fate for myself. And so they have bought my silence, without even knowing they've done so. A Sujet can play the long game as well as any Kith on this world. I will have answers, even if it costs me everything I hold sacred to get there. Well, she certainly has her convictions and conflictions, shall we say, but it seems that she's ready to move forward. The journey begins. Jacob, I have never missed you more than I did today. You would have loved it, but how did you ever stand these sand-cursed uniforms? I am lodged at the cool dark edge of the sand cliffs you used to love, and I still feel like I'm melting in the smothering suit. Enough of that though. The important thing is we finally got to see her. They swore in the junior officers on the bridge of the Capisi. She's nearly complete, and I'm going to be her science officer. Garquette, he's our Sujet Saw now. Can you believe it? Had me come into his office yesterday and told me what to expect in his big puffy voice. I nodded at the right points, agreed when he said something ornate about the eyes of the Kith would be on me and so on and so forth. But all I was really thinking was that I had made it. I was going to be a part of Operation Kadim. I was going to follow your tracks and nothing would get in my way now. And old Garquette only once had to puff at me to pay attention. The Capisi, she's magnificent. A whole new class, very different from your Ifrit. To me, she seems huge, though the new engineering officers keep telling me she's based on the same frame as the Ifrit. She just seems bigger. Cutting-edge sensors and 4 mainframe cores. From the outside, she's gorgeous and kind of scary. Much heavier armor, more hardpoints, and the drive system. Words fail me. The treads are twice the size of the Ifrits, and the drive systems make the surrounding dunes throb and shiver like the skin of a huge drum. I was there when they rolled her out onto the testing grounds, and it was. Sorry, Jacob, I had to regroup for a moment. I just couldn't stop seeing your face, watching the carrier roll out beside me. You should have been there. Of course you know who was really there. Those damn pushy Sadim showed up with their Sakala. Same design as the Capisi, and of course the Sadim had to get theirs out the industrial yard 6 months ago so they could take the class name first. Always something with them. You'd think the Sakala, with all their tech, for the way they were, strutting around going on about how they had already been on patrol for the past triad, and how they would keep an eye out for us on Operation Kadim. I started to politely inform them that we had been able to add even more equipment to the Capisi, but Sakala's Captain Mashad gave me one of those looks, and my mouth clapped tight as the lid of a well. It's so strange, Jacob, feeling all these things I know you must have felt in the days before you left. The pride in your carrier, the love and respect of your crewmates, the anticipation, the thrill of discovery, the sense of wonder about the anomaly, all of it. You had to be feeling all of this. But at the same time, I can't stop feeling like this is what I was meant to do. It has gone beyond playing a role to get to you and your body and put your body and spirit to rest. For the first time, this feels like my life. I am happy and racked with guilt at the same time. I don't know what is coming. I don't know if we will survive finding out what happened to you, Jacob. I don't know what we will find at the anomaly, but I do know I will not fail you or our Kith. I will do whatever I have to take whatever risks are necessary to see this mission to its end. This will be my last entry before departure. Just in case the worst occurs, I will be leaving this journal in the same chest that I borrowed it from. Perhaps some future Sujet will learn something about these times from this notebook. At the very least, they will know how much one woman loved her brother. Alright, well, that is Rachel's personal journal before she sets off. Going back briefly to the Kharakian timeline, the history of Kharak here. So I want to point out and make some references, of course, to Homeworld 1. So we know in the opening animatic of Homeworld 1, it said 100 years ago a satellite detected, an object beneath the sands of Kharak.
100 years ago, a satellite detected an object under the sands of the Great Desert.
And that was, there we go, right here in 1106, right? They discovered the Draki object when the satellite malfunctions. Okay. So it says 100 years ago, right? And this game takes place in 1110, 4 years after that. So the historical and technical briefing of Homeworld 1 further mentions that, right, after 1110, 2 years later, in 1112, the core was eventually found. And then, even after that, in 1135, archaeologist Sigald locates the guide stone within the Kartoba. The plan for the mothership was finalized in 1159, and the mothership was finally launched in 1214. Which makes sense. I mean, it's not precisely 100 years ago, okay? If the mothership was launched in 1214 and they found the object in 1106, right? Yeah, close enough, right? They're being kind of nice round numbers, operating in nice round numbers. So there's that. So I mean, these Homeworld games, many of them are separated by like a century or more, right? Deserts of Kharak and Homeworld 1 are separated by more than 100 years, right? Homeworld 1 and Homeworld 2 are separated by 115 years. And I believe currently, again, because it's not released yet, but I believe Homeworld 3 actually takes place maybe another 100-something, maybe more years from the events of Homeworld 2. So all these Homeworld games take place with like a century of time in between them. So that was the bulk of the expedition guide. Again, I'm not really going to go into part 11 here, the making of, though. Some of it is really interesting, right? You can see how they started out, as Blackbird started out as a studio, and then how they eventually moved from it being a spiritual successor of hardware over to Homeworld. Their game design ideas, how they built the animatics, right? And their philosophy for filming, right? They actually took looked at camera lenses and made it a certain way, so in various development videos. So if I can, one of these, let me show you. There is a timeline. You can see some pretty cool art. There's the crow's nest at Keats Island, British Columbia. Yeah, you see a lot of the nice, really neat concept art, and I love the concept art for Homeworld. It's just some of my favorite out there. They obviously, they've mentioned in this that they have gone for a very functional design. A lot of the stuff was meant to look very realistic, like it could be an actual vehicle, right? Even though it's still science fiction. But part of their design philosophy is creating vehicles that would, obviously they created a lot of these base runner vehicles, right? They had a philosophy that these things need to look like they're real. Aha, here we go. So this, all right, look, here's an actual timeline of the events of Homeworld and some of the Homeworld 1. So you have year 0 right here, recorded history begins, right? Eco disasters, I'm guessing, right? The Gulf Sea rise, yada, 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 the heresy wars here. They're looking at the history, right? But right here you see 1214, right? MS launch, probably mothership launch, right? Destruction of Kharak, right? Built this, so on and so forth, right? 1106, the fragment is found, the expedition, right? So right here, it ties into some of the events of Homeworld and Homeworld 2 up here, right? 3 cores unite. Yeah, so you have Homeworld 1 and Homeworld 2, the events right there. So again, this is just a, development work that the studio did. I don't know if we could really take this as canon. It seems more or less, right, pretty accurate to what we have. So, that was the big, long multi-video of all the backstory, the expedition guide of Kharak and Deserts of Kharak. So, like I said, we will be getting into the gameplay proper, and I will say, like I've said, I enjoy Deserts of Kharak. The gameplay is just really smooth, it works really well, the story has good setups, good payoffs, so I enjoy Deserts of Kharak a lot more than I enjoy the story of Homeworld 2. So, but hey, you know, Homeworld 3 is coming up, and I plan to do that as well, right? I'm gonna get the big Ultimate Collector's Special whatever edition, you know, and yeah, we'll be doing that. So, yeah, Homeworld 3 will be coming up, but first, let's get through Deserts of Kharak. All right. So, that's all I have to say. I'll see everyone later.